When a man has nobody but God, he enters a space where worldly ties lose their hold and eternity becomes real. This isn't mere loneliness, it's holy ground. It's where the soul finds its true dependence not on others' approval, not on material security, not on passing comforts, but on God's presence. Some of the greatest men in history spent time alone. Abraham left everything familiar to follow an unseen voice. Joseph was betrayed, sold, jailed, and forgotten before his dream came true. Elijah stood alone against kings and false prophets. They all walked through isolation's fire, but none walked alone. Neither will you. You aren't abandoned, you're being refined. You aren't forgotten, you're being prepared. God is doing work in you that nobody can see yet. That's why you must not quit. Don't curse the silence. Don't run from the stillness. Stay with it. Something holy is happening. When the world leaves you behind, when friends disappear, when loved ones don't understand, when you stand at your limit saying, God, I can't take one more step, that's when heaven answers with power. That's when strength rises that isn't your own. That's when peace comes amid storms. Peace doesn't come because the waves stop, but because you finally saw the one who walks on water. Faith forms not in comfort, but in contradiction. When everything says you're alone, yet you choose to believe you're held. When everything says you're finished, yet you hear the quiet voice say, I'm not done with you. That's faith. That's fire-tested belief. That's unshakable. God always shows up when all other options are gone. He doesn't need good conditions. He doesn't need crowds. He doesn't wait for perfect timing by human standards. He steps into prison cells, lions' dens, and fiery furnaces. Not after the crisis, but right in the middle. He does this again and again for those who call on him. You may feel overlooked today. Maybe nobody sees your pain. Maybe they see your strength, but not your struggle. They see your smile, but not your sleepless nights. Maybe you've started believing the lie that you must carry everything yourself. But I'm here to tell you, you don't have to. You were never meant to. There is one who sticks closer than a brother, one who will never leave or abandon you, one who's the same yesterday, today, and forever. One who watches the sparrow and holds you even now. He sees the hidden battles. He sees the broken places. He sees the tears nobody else sees. And he says, you are mine. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. There's a kind of prayer that comes only when a man has no options left. It's not polished or pretty. It's raw, real, desperate. It's the cry rising from dust and ashes. God, if you don't show up, I won't make it. That kind of prayer moves heaven. When you reach your limit, you reach the start of grace. Grace isn't a fragile idea. It's a force. It lifts you when your knees give out. It carries you when your strength is gone. It wraps you in mercy when you've failed again. Grace is God's hand pulling you from the pit, not because you earned it, but because He loves you. I don't know what valley you're walking through. I don't know what silence fills your life, but I know this. If you have God, you have everything you need. When the world fades, when people walk away, when doors close, God remains. And He doesn't just remain, He restores. God doesn't just sit with you in brokenness. He rebuilds you. He doesn't just comfort you in sorrow. He gives you beauty for ashes, strength for weakness. He turns mourning into dancing, weeping into joy. There is a future for you. There is hope beyond pain. There is life after loss. But you won't find it chasing people's approval or worldly pleasures. You'll find it on your knees, alone with the one who formed you and knows every hair on your head. Don't hate this season. Don't rush the process. Lean into it. Let it purify and simplify you. Let it draw you closer to the only one who can satisfy your heart's depths. This world overflows with noise, opinions, distractions, lies. But when you're alone with God, that noise fades. What remains is truth, love, power. That power will fill you. That love will change you. That truth will free you. One day you'll look back on this season not with bitterness, but with thankfulness. You'll say, "In that lonely place I learned to listen. In that dark valley I found light. When I had nobody else, I realized God was all I ever needed." When you rise from this place, you'll carry something unshakable. You'll have a story forged in fire. You'll speak with authority not from reading books, but from living truth in your bones. You'll bring peace to chaotic rooms. You'll bring hope to broken people. When they ask, "How did you survive?" you'll answer, "I had nobody but God, and that was enough." You are not disqualified. You are not too far gone. You are not beyond repair. In fact, you are exactly where you need to be for a miracle to unfold. When a man has nobody but God, he's ready to be used by God. He no longer leans on shallow supports. He's no longer drunk on applause. He no longer chases what never satisfies. He stands on the rock, and that kind of man cannot be shaken. This isn't the end of your story. This is the chapter that changes everything. Stay faithful. Stay humble. Stay available. God isn't finished. He's writing something beautiful, even if right now all you see are broken lines. Trust the author. He finishes what he starts. When a man finds himself deeply alone, he may feel abandoned. The silence of an empty room, missing voices, and lack of human presence can overwhelm him. In those moments, loneliness feels like a curse, a painful reminder of lost relationships. But what if this solitude isn't a curse at all? What if it's the sacred space where God works most powerfully? The truth is, solitude is often where change happens, where a man can hear God's voice clearly, where his soul takes shape for greater things. In quiet moments alone, a man can strip away the world's distractions. Daily life's hustle drowns out God's gentle voice. With noise from opinions, expectations, and endless demands, we can't hear. But when a man is alone, without pressure to please others or respond to constant noise, he can listen, reflect, and be still before God. In solitude, he's invited into deeper connection with his Creator. There's nobody else to impress, nobody else to answer to, just the direct link between soul and God. This is where God begins his work of personal change. The distractions that once clouded his mind fall away. He begins to see clearly. Solitude lets a man face his heart's deepest parts. These are often hidden from the world and even from himself. In silence, we see our weaknesses, fears, doubts, and insecurities. But this isn't cause for despair. It's an opportunity for growth. In these moments, God meets us where we are, not despite our weaknesses, but because of them. God doesn't call the perfect. He calls the broken, the weary, those with nowhere else to turn. In the quiet, he shapes us into who we were meant to be. Solitude isn't just for self-reflection, it's for revelation too. In stillness, we hear God's voice more clearly than ever. His words cut through life's noise and pierce our hearts with truth and guidance. When distractions disappear, God's voice becomes the loudest in our lives. In solitude, we truly surrender our plans and desires to Him. We stop trying to control everything and instead follow His lead. In that moment of surrender, change begins. In solitude, we aren't abandoned. We're being prepared. God uses this time to refine us, teach us, and strengthen us for what's ahead. While uncomfortable or painful, these times of isolation help us become who we were meant to be. God works through our solitude to draw us closer and make us more like Him. Solitude isn't empty. It's where God's presence can fill us, renew us, and change us from inside out. Throughout history, many great people weren't made great by fame or fortune, but by seasons of solitude and challenge. In the wilderness, far from spotlight, God often does His deepest work in someone's life. When Moses fled to the wilderness, when David tended sheep, when Jesus went to the desert, they weren't being abandoned. They were being prepared. The wilderness, by nature, is a place of isolation and hardship. It strips away worldly comforts, leaving only what truly matters. There are no distractions, no applause, no outside validation, just a person and their Creator. In this challenging environment, God works in ways we can't always understand right away. A major change happens in the wilderness. It prepares a person not just for success, but for a purposeful life. Think of Moses. Before leading a nation, he spent 40 years in the wilderness as an exile, running from past mistakes. There he learned humility, patience, and reliance on God. He heard God's voice from a burning bush. In that moment, he realized his life was part of something much bigger. Had he stayed in Egypt surrounded by power and influence, he might never have learned the wilderness lessons. The wilderness wasn't punishment for Moses. It was where God prepared him for a divine purpose that changed history. David, too, was chosen to be king, but didn't immediately take the throne. Instead, he spent years running from King Saul, hiding in caves. During these wilderness years, David grew in strength, character, and trust in God. He learned to lead not through force, but through humility and faith. He wrote many psalms then, raw expressions of emotion, faith, and closeness with God. Had he become king without these formative years, he might not have led with the wisdom and grace that marked his reign. The wilderness isn't just a physical place, it's often a spiritual condition. We all experience seasons of difficulty, loss, or transition. During these times, we may feel far from God's presence and purpose. But these wilderness seasons are often the very places where God prepares us for something greater. They aren't dead ends, they're launching pads for what's ahead. Just as God called Moses and David from the wilderness at the right time, He will bring us out when the time is right. But don't underestimate wilderness preparation. There we learn to rely solely on God, where we're tested and refined, where we discover strength we never knew we had. The wilderness may be difficult, but in these testing times, we become who God needs us to be to fulfill His purposes. In the wilderness, we learn to trust. We learn God is faithful even when we can't see the way forward. We learn His provision is enough, even when resources seem limited. We learn to hear His voice clearly in the desert quiet, away from worldly noise. Here we discover deeper intimacy with God, a relationship built on trust rather than on crowd approval. The wilderness isn't something to run from, it's something to accept. It's where God shapes and prepares us. So when you find yourself in a season of solitude, struggle, or confusion, remember, you aren't forgotten. You're being prepared. The wilderness may be uncomfortable, but it isn't the end. It's where God is preparing you for something far greater than you can imagine. In deep despair, when life feels too heavy and strength to continue seems gone, God's strength shows most clearly. Many see weakness as something to hide, a sign of failure. But to God, weakness is where His strength fully displays. When a man feels he can't go on, stripped of ability and power, he finds strength beyond himself. These seasons bring us face to face with our limits, the harsh reality that we can't control every situation, change every person, or determine every outcome. In these helpless moments, God's strength becomes most evident. His power, working through our weakness, is the most beautiful, life-changing force in the world. Paul, one of the early church's greatest leaders, described this truth when speaking of his own struggles. He prayed 3 times for God to remove a thorn in the flesh that tormented him. God's answer wasn't to remove the pain, but to say, "My grace is enough for you, for my power works best in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9. Paul's response was remarkable. "So I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." Paul saw that God's glory shines most brightly, not in his strength, but in his weakness. In vulnerability, Paul experienced God's sufficient grace and deep power. This idea contradicts the world's view of strength. Society teaches self-reliance, to push through hardship with willpower, to overcome challenges through personal determination. But God calls us to different thinking. He invites us to surrender self-reliance and trust His power. He shows that true strength isn't about what we can do ourselves, but what He can do through us when we admit our need for Him. When we're at our lowest, when we feel totally powerless, we're often more open to God's work in our lives. Then we stop relying on our own cleverness or resources and lean fully on Him. In weakness, we make room for God's power to shine. His strength comes differently than expected. It's not human strength defined by physical might or self-sufficiency. It's divine strength, gentle yet unshakable. It gives courage to stand when we want to fall, wisdom when confused, peace when overwhelmed. God's strength doesn't eliminate our weakness. It works perfectly through it. He takes our frailty and through grace turns it into something beautiful and powerful. In despair, when broken and tired, God meets us with power to rise again. His strength sustains us when we can't sustain ourselves. His strength carries us when our legs give out. His strength lifts us when we're too tired to continue. The beauty of divine strength is that it changes us. We emerge from trials stronger than before, not through our own power, but by allowing God to work through us. When we acknowledge dependence on Him, we open ourselves to His changing power. We come out of weakness not the same, but shaped, refined, and empowered by God Himself. God's strength isn't given without weakness, but in the midst of it. When weak, we experience His strength most purely. When we have nothing left, He fills us with everything needed. In that divine exchange, we realize that what we thought would defeat us, the trial, struggle, weakness, has become where we encounter the fullness of God's power and grace. So if you're in a season of weakness, don't despair. Don't believe the lie that you're not enough or that you're failing. This is exactly where God does His greatest work. His strength is made perfect in your weakness. If you trust Him in this season, you'll come through stronger, more dependent on Him, more aware of the power only He provides.
Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in every life when we're forced to wait, to pause, to endure the silence of heaven and the uncertainty of earth. If you receive something too soon, it can crush you. That's why God waits until the blessing won't break you. And one day, when you step into the fulfillment of what you once cried for, you will look back and say, "And now I understand. Now I see why He made me wait." Don't confuse God's silence with His absence. Even when you feel alone, heaven is active. The hand of God does its best work in hidden places. Just because you can't trace Him doesn't mean you can't trust Him. And so I challenge you, don't waste the wait. Worship while you wait. Learn while you wait. Trust while you wait. Because when the answer comes, when the promise is fulfilled, when the door swings open, you will not only be ready, you will be grateful. One day you'll stand on the other side of the storm and say, "God, thank you for not giving me what I wanted when I wanted it. You knew what I needed before I ever asked." The wait was the womb that birthed the awakening. One of the most misunderstood aspects of a spiritual journey is the concept of delay. We often associate delay with denial. In our human reasoning, if something hasn't happened yet, we start assuming it won't happen at all. But in the divine realm, delay is not the same as denial. It is often a sign that God is working, preparing, and orchestrating something far more significant than we could ever imagine. When you're walking with God, you have to understand that His ways are not your ways, and His timing is not your timing. We live in a culture of instant gratification. We want everything now, quick answers, fast results, immediate change. But God is not bound by earthly clocks. He doesn't operate by deadlines. He operates by divine design. God's delays are strategic. They are calculated with purpose. When he causes a door to remain closed or a dream to be postponed, it's not a punishment. It's protection. Many times what you think you're ready for, God knows would crush you if given too soon. He sees what you cannot see. He knows what lies ahead. And so, in his mercy, he withholds certain things until you are prepared to carry them. Think of it like this. If you hand a child a sharp sword before they are trained, they will hurt themselves or someone else. The sword isn't the problem. It's the timing of receiving it. The same is true with blessings, promotions, relationships, or callings. They are good in themselves, but when received prematurely, they can cause more harm than help. That's why God delays, not to deprive you, but to develop you. During these waiting seasons, God is building your foundation. He's strengthening your character, expanding your patience, and deepening your spiritual understanding. You might not see the progress, but trust me, growth is happening underground before it ever breaks the surface, just as seeds germinate in hidden soil before they bloom. Your destiny is often taking root in silence before it blossoms in public. The delay is not God ignoring you. It's God investing in you. He's working in the background, moving people into position, aligning circumstances, and refining your heart. What seems like a standstill is actually a setup for something greater. He's not just preparing the blessing for you. He's preparing you for the blessing. It's also important to remember that some delays are divinely designed to redirect you. You may have been praying for one thing, but God knows there's something better. And instead of giving you what you're asking for, he's guiding you toward what you truly need. Sometimes unanswered prayers are some of God's greatest gifts. In hindsight, you'll often find that the very thing you were frustrated about not receiving was the very thing that protected you from a deeper pain. So when you're in a season of waiting, don't let the enemy whisper lies that you've been forgotten. Don't let your impatience make you step out of God's will. Trust the process. Stay faithful. Keep praying, keep growing, and keep your heart open to what God is teaching you in the way. Because when the time is right, when your heart is ready and the path is clear, God will open doors that no man can shut. And in that moment, you'll realize the delay wasn't a denial at all. It was divine timing, and it was worth every second. One of the most essential truths in the journey of faith is this: spiritual maturity is not automatic. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't come simply by hearing sermons, quoting scriptures, or attending spiritual gatherings. True spiritual growth requires process, and that process often involves time, testing, and yes, waiting. We live in a world that celebrates speed, fast success, instant answers, quick fixes. But the spiritual life is not a microwave experience. It is more like a slow-cooked meal. Rich, deep, and layered with flavor that only time can produce. Just as a tree doesn't grow strong roots in a day, you don't become spiritually mature without going through seasons that stretch and shape you. God is not merely interested in giving you what you want. He's interested in making you into who he created you to be. And that kind of transformation takes process. The waiting season, the dry places, the unanswered prayers, they are all part of a divine strategy to grow your character, deepen your trust, and strengthen your soul. In fact, some of the greatest spiritual lessons are not learned during times of blessing, but in the valley of delay. It's there, in the tension between what God promised and what you currently see, that your faith is tested and refined. It's easy to believe when everything is going well, but real faith is proven when God is silent and you're still trusting. God uses process to remove what is superficial and strengthen what is eternal. Think about it. If everything happened immediately, you wouldn't develop the endurance to handle the weight of your calling. You wouldn't cultivate the humility to carry blessings with grace. You wouldn't build the discernment to recognize God's hand in both open and closed doors. Process creates spiritual depth. It teaches you how to rely not on emotions, but on truth, It separates momentary excitement from lasting conviction, and as you walk through the process, God begins to peel away pride, fear, impatience, and doubt, so that what remains is a person fully anchored in Him. This is why some breakthroughs are delayed, because God is far more concerned with your becoming than your arriving. He wants you to be strong enough to stay in the place He's bringing you to. It's one thing to reach a mountaintop moment, and it's another thing entirely to remain there with integrity, humility, and purpose. That's what the process does. It gives you roots that can sustain your reach. There are no shortcuts to spiritual maturity. You can't skip the waiting room and expect to walk into your purpose fully equipped. Just as a baby needs time in the womb to develop, so do you need time in the spiritual womb where God forms you in hiddenness, away from the spotlight, shaping you for what's ahead. And it's important to understand, delay is not stagnation when you're in the hands of God. Even when it feels like nothing is happening, something is. Your faith is growing. Your character is forming. Your spiritual muscles are being built. So if you find yourself in a prolonged season of waiting, don't despise it. Don't rush out of it. Lean into it. Let it do its work. Let it prepare you, purify you, and prune you. Because spiritual maturity doesn't come from getting everything you want. It comes from trusting God even when you don't. This is the process. And the process is the place where God makes you strong enough, wise enough, and mature enough to walk in everything He has for you. In every waiting season, there is a hidden truth many overlook. There is purpose in the pause, the moments where nothing seems to be moving forward, when your prayers seem unanswered and life feels like it's on hold. Those are often the very moments where God is doing His most intentional work. The pause is not wasted time. It's God-ordained preparation time. It may feel like your life is in neutral, but in reality, God is rearranging, refining, and aligning things for your good and His glory. The reason it feels so still is because God is working beneath the surface. And the deeper the purpose, the more intentional the pause. When we experience a pause in life, our first reaction is often to push past it, to rush ahead, or to become frustrated. But we must understand that the pause is not accidental. It's strategic. God uses pauses to shift your perspective, to help you recognize what truly matters, and to reposition your heart to depend fully on Him. Consider the story of Joseph. He had a dream from God as a young man, yet he went through betrayal, slavery, and prison before stepping into the palace. From the outside, it looked like his life was on hold, delay after delay, setback after setback. But every pause had a purpose. In the pit, God was humbling him. In Potiphar's house, God was teaching him leadership. In the prison, God was training him to interpret dreams. And when the time was right, Joseph was ready, not just to sit on the throne, but to carry the wisdom and compassion required to lead. The same applies to you. What you see as a delay might actually be the very season that is preparing you for your purpose. The pause is God's way of ensuring that when you arrive at your destination, you will be mature enough to manage it. Now think about it. Would you rather arrive too soon and not be ready, or wait longer and walk in fully prepared? The pause often carries the answers to prayers you don't even know how to ask yet. It gives God the room to shape your inner world, your thoughts, your motives, your values, so you won't sabotage what He's preparing to give you. There's something else. In the pause, you gain clarity. You begin to separate what is urgent from what is eternal. You hear God's voice more clearly when you're not running at the speed of the world. You learn to trust Him not just for outcomes, but in the process itself. The pause becomes your training ground, your spiritual boot camp, where faith becomes less about feelings and more about faithfulness. It's also in the pause where intimacy with God is deepened. When you're not distracted by movement and momentum, you're more open to His presence. God doesn't just want to get you somewhere. He wants to walk with you through the journey, and the pause gives space for communion, for stillness, and for deep soul work that can't happen in the noise. So don't despise the pause. Don't rush through it, and don't ignore what it's trying to teach you. And there is purpose in the silence. There is destiny in the delay. And when you finally step into the next chapter, you'll realize that what God did in the pause was not just preparation. It was essential. One of the most liberating yet challenging truths in the spiritual journey is this. Clarity doesn't always come before obedience. Often it comes after surrender. We want to understand everything. We want the plan laid out, the reasons explained, and the outcomes guaranteed. But God doesn't operate by human logic. He invites us to trust before we see and surrender before we understand. Surrender is not giving up, it's giving over. It's when you lay down your need to control, your timeline, your expectations, and say, God, I may not understand this right now, but I trust you enough to walk with you anyway. And it's in that sacred exchange, your will for his, that clarity begins to unfold. God doesn't reveal everything at once, and for good reason. If he showed you the full picture, you might run from it, or try to accomplish it in your own strength. He reveals truth in layers and steps, and each act of surrender opens your eyes to a new level of understanding. That's how spiritual awakening works. It's not instant revelation. It's a process of unfolding, a journey of discovering what was already written for you, but only visible when your heart is positioned to see. Sometimes we pray, God, show me what to do. And God responds, surrender what you're holding. Because often it's not that God is silent. It's that we're too cluttered to hear. We're clinging to our plans, our assumptions, our version of how life should go. And until we let go, we can't truly receive. Surrender clears the noise. It breaks the illusion that we're in control and positions us to hear from God more clearly than ever before. Think about Abraham. God told him to leave everything he knew, his country, his comfort, his family, and go to a land I will show you. He didn't get a map. He got a promise, and that promise required surrender. It wasn't until Abraham obeyed that clarity came. Step by step, the picture unfolded. And it's the same with us. God often gives direction after we take the first step, not before. We want understanding, but God wants trust. We want answers, but God wants relationship. Surrender is what bridges the gap between confusion and clarity. It moves us from frustration into revelation. And that revelation isn't always about your situation changing. It's often about you changing. You start seeing things differently, not because circumstances have shifted, but because your spirit has aligned with God's. Clarity that comes through surrender is deeper than information. It's transformation. It's when peace replaces panic. It's when you no longer need to know why to keep walking forward. It's when you realize that faith is not certainty. Faith is confidence in God despite uncertainty. That's where clarity really lives, not in the removal of all questions, but in the assurance that God is leading you even in the dark. Surrender also teaches you discernment. When you let go of your own will, your spiritual senses become sharper. You begin to see God's hand in things you used to overlook. You recognize divine delays, purposeful detours, and redirections as acts of love, not rejection. And eventually, when you look back, what once made no sense begins to come together like a divine puzzle, perfectly placed, piece by piece. But you wouldn't have seen it if you didn't surrender. Surrender unlocks vision. It aligns your heart with heaven and shifts your posture from striving to receiving. And once you've walked through the fire, once you've trusted God in the silence, clarity will meet you on the other side. Not just about what happened, but about who you became through it. Clarity isn't a prerequisite for surrender. It's the reward of it. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you find yourself in a season of waiting, wondering why the door hasn't opened, why the breakthrough hasn't come, why the promise hasn't been fulfilled, don't lose heart. What feels like a delay is not a denial. God is not punishing you. He is preparing you. There is process in the pause, and every moment of silence is filled with divine strategy. Spiritual maturity is forged in stillness, and your capacity to receive is being shaped while you wait. And when you finally surrender, not just your plans, but your need for answers, you'll find a clarity that doesn't come from circumstances changing, but from you changing, from becoming the kind of person who doesn't just walk into blessings, but carries them with wisdom, grace, and purpose. Because one day you'll see why God made you wait. You'll understand the protection in the delay, the growth in the process, the power in the pause, and the beauty in surrender. You'll see that the wait wasn't wasted. It was working. And when the time is right, what once made you weep will make you worship. So keep trusting, keep growing, keep waiting with expectation, not frustration, because God is not just taking his time. He's taking care of your destiny.